Today, what I want to talk to you about and explore is this idea of friction. The way that I like to think about it is, let's imagine for a moment, each of us in this room have had at some stage recently an experience at a food and beverage outlet where you try to order food or buy a coffee. Sally walks into the shop, she sits down, 5 minutes goes by, 10 minutes goes by, 15 minutes goes by. Nobody has taken Sally's order. And all of a sudden, Sally will leave and walk away. And I'm sure that all of us in this room have personally been customers in situations where we've experienced such high levels of friction that we've simply dropped off and gone somewhere else. In the example I've just given you, Sally neither bought anything and there was no coffee served. Sally never experienced just how good the coffee might have been at that barista outlet. I challenge all of you to think for a moment, as a customer, what did Sally really care about? What dimensions of the product, other than the quality of the coffee, was Sally measuring? Time. And it's so sad that we can have such great experienced solicitors in this room who can do fantastic work. And at times, that work is simply never served because Sally dropped off. We're being measured on dimensions other than the quality of our coffee and the quality of the documents that we write. We just elaborate on Jeff's thought there for a moment and explore it scientifically. X is greater than Y. If X is greater than Y, it's all good. Customer experience is satisfied. But if X, the perceived value of your law services, is less than the required input from the customer, drop-off will ensue. And later we're going to talk a little bit about how drop-off not only occurs in the sales environment, but can be experienced during onboarding. I was talking to an organisation recently, a software as a service business, that's just discussing this issue about drop-off, abandonment at the onboarding process when they try to roll out their payroll applications to the HR managers inside large organisations. They've actually made a payment, they've agreed to do something, and yet still they can experience drop-off at that moment. Further to that, I'd like to tell you a little story about a property that I was looking at purchasing in Bathurst. I approached Steele & Co., the local soliciting firm there, and that's where I met Ryan. And during my interactions with Ryan, he brought up six maps, excuse me. And we started to discuss this particular property. And after about 15 minutes on our Zoom call, we both agreed, without having spent any money on a surveyor, that this was not a property that I wanted to get involved in. Horrible easements, boundary in the wrong place, parcels of land broken in different bits and pieces. I didn't want to be part of this. I called the solicitors that I normally deal with in Sydney, and I said to them, have you used this application? And they said, no way. Compliance must be done like this. Okay, look, I don't want to pay for a survey. I just want a cursive examination, first of all, to see whether I even want to be involved in this speculative piece of property. The difference is between the viewpoints of these two law firms is bigger than the $3 coffee that Sally missed out later. Earlier, when we were talking about the experience at the coffee shop, it cost them $3, but it cost that law firm in Sydney a much larger amount of money by not thinking about new kinds of customer experiences. And I love being in industries where people are blinkered to the customer goal. They got their blinkers on and they're thinking about lawyering or accounting, and they're not thinking about what the customer wants, and they're ignoring it, and they're being blinkered in a certain way that they want to think and act. My second business that I operated, which I sold in 2015, it was an accounting and compliance business I built in Hong Kong and Singapore. I'm not an accountant. And people were mystified by that. They said, how do you start an accounting practice when you're not an accountant? I said, well, I suppose I'll hire accountants, but I'm really good with customer experience. And one of the things I loved to witness around me the blinkering that was going on, where all my competitors are focused on doing accounting and I'm focused on doing something completely different to generate revenue. And so paradoxically, the more that we focus on our own operational goals, the more we think about our own company and design customer experience around what we want, the less revenue that we make. There is a correlation between sales and customer experience. Many organizations, when they're building a company, you've got your P&L, they're thinking about HR, they're thinking about what markets they want to target, what they want to call the company. A lot of businesses will put customer experience right down the bottom. They'll think about it right at the end, almost like the way university students will cram the night before an examination. You know, they just don't think it's very important. But what we just demonstrated with the coffee example, the coffee shop, and with the example with Steel & Co, is that the companies that are on top of customer experience are making more money. So, when I'm doing Run Frictionless, we run friction tests. So we ran one in just 2021. This is on the superannuation industry in Australia. The question we're trying to find out here is, all things held constant, talent, brand, which organisation has the highest propensity to create a customer? And the one that was on top of the stack is up here, QSuper. Out of the gate, they have the greatest propensity to create a customer because they have the lowest friction quotient. The players that you see down here are in a lot of trouble because their friction is so high that it exceeds the average of the sample that you see in front of you. That means that the staff in those companies have to work twice as hard to get a customer than QSuper. So in a very tight labour market, a place where it's hard to get paralegals and solicitors, if I was to pose a question to you, which of these organisations do you think your staff want to work for? Do you want to work for an organisation where it's hard to get stuff done? Or do you prefer to work for a company where it's easy to get stuff done? It's easy to get stuff done, right? Yeah, it's a natural progression. We've got really talented people working for us who want to deliver great work to customers. But if we make it hard for them, friction is not only felt externally through the customer experience, but it's internal within your organizations. And it's quite often one of the reasons why people leave companies. I have built over 30 different customer experiences. And what I have given you in front of you, all of you, is some pages where you can follow me during this session. And I'm going to teach you a tool that I wrote for myself. It's a modeling tool called the 4 Qs. I use it to build customer experience. I'm going to teach you to a beginner level today. And what I hope that you do is follow me as I go through this session and begin using it immediately on your own business. Start thinking about the various quadrants, writing things down, because in about an hour, I'm just going to walk around and see who's doing their homework, who's not. Might have to rough up some people, I don't know. Depends, Tom, right? So have a look at that, and don't worry if you don't catch all the things that I'm describing today, because if you point your camera phones up here, you can grab the book as Ryan did, and it goes into a lot more detail. There's a lot more stories that you can explore. But the great thing is with the model is there are no videos, there are no software. You can begin immediately using this decision-making tool for yourselves, which will help you to either eliminate friction from your organization or add friction. And that's really the importance of this tool. I use it to help me to eliminate friction within companies. You see, friction is not a sales goal. It's not the practice manager's goal. It's not the solicitor's goal. It's an organizational goal. And if you use and adopt the model that I'm showing you today, everybody in the organization can help hunt and eliminate friction. Before I get into it, I just wanted to share just 2 things that I particularly like about it. Difficult for you as an audience to appreciate these, but please just hold them in your minds as I'm walking through the 4 Qs. One of the things that I really like about the tool, remember, I wrote it for myself. And so this is not a piece of academia. This is a serious piece of kit that I use, because without it, I'll get fired. So one of the things that I really liked about it is it creates windows of value into your organization. It allows you to group processes, staff, and people into one or more of these quadrants, where you can begin to see how you spend your time and where you create value as an organization. And the second thing I like about it is, as a decision-making tool, it's very easy for other people to simulate good decisions you make within your practice, because they can start to see the knock-on effects, the consequences of making a decision from one quadrant to another, which we're going to see in a moment. Sometimes when people join an organization, it's very, very difficult for them to make an improvement and drive down friction when they don't understand the consequences of a decision that they're about to make. When I rolled this out to a logistics company, one of the interesting things that they told me was, they said that it finally gave us a common language for which all of us from different departments across the company can make a decision and understand the gravity of the decision that's being made. Okay, so here I go. Not in sequential order. It doesn't matter where you begin. Some of you who are perhaps more kind of customer experience, which we're going to focus a lot on today, might focus on quadrant 4. The more leaders in the room will probably focus on 3. The quadrant or the product type persons, technical people, in 2. I'm just going to start with 1, and I'm going to begin because it's probably the most difficult question for all of us to ask. And every time I ask solicitors this question, I always get really interesting answers. Who we serve. Now, I want you to think about this quadrant on 3 levels: who we serve today, who we serve tomorrow, and who we never serve. I want you to think about all 3 of these. The book will go into a lot more detail, but today we're just going to hammer around these 3. The customers we serve today. Let's think about that one for a moment. Now, a lot of companies I'll go and work with will turn and say to me, well, we serve anybody. Have you, anybody in the room? It's okay if you attest to this. If anybody that walks in through the doors, you'll simply serve them immediately. You feel obliged to serve anybody. Mister, I can see you don't agree. Your head's like, very nice. I like how you're thinking about the decision maker, the individual. I think that's really important here when you're customer profiling. And what's interesting is you mentioned about 3 data points there. You talked about age, number of children, but you can have all sorts of other data points. For example, you can talk about their psychographics. You know, for one company we work with, we discovered that there was a difference between the salon owners. Okay, so the hair salon owners in Australia, it's about 4,000 of them. And of the 4,000, you have ones which we labeled tax optimizers, and another group who were entrepreneurial, who woke up every day thinking about the awards they wanted to win and how they're going to turn their business into a chain. We went from an addressable market of 4,000 down to about 500. And that's all because we sat down and asked ourselves, who do we serve? The wrong answer is to say that we serve anyone. Because I challenge you, I've never met them. I don't know this fella called anyone, but apparently they're out there and they buy lots of product. They just keep buying. And it's a mystery to me. I know there's Sally, Tom, and Harry, but there's this other fella called anyone, and they also apparently buy. Okay, so having a really good, clear understanding about who you serve is really important. And when you understand who you serve, then you know the antithesis, right? You know who you do not serve or who you never serve. Software as a service example, Philippines, 5 years ago when I was there. I went to the customer success team who do the onboarding. I said, listen, I can't get any sense out of the sales manager. What happens in this company? Well, they said, we definitely know who we shouldn't serve. We shouldn't be talking to manufacturing companies. And I said, why? And they said, because every time we try to run their payroll, they've got these strange calculations, got these piecemeal computations that we've never seen before. When we sat down and built the product 2 years ago, we had no insight into how these people and how this industry operates. But I know one thing, we pay commissions on the sales every time they come through, and then we get negative reviews at the onboarding stage because the salespeople keep bringing us deals that we can't do anything with. Is that something that's common? Does that happen within organizations, your companies right now, where you feel like maybe you're accepting deals from clients you shouldn't be? I think what the key thing to do is not to beat yourselves up about it, but simply to reflect and look at exactly the nature of that profile and write a specification around it. So what you're looking for is you're thinking, okay, we don't want to let them into the organization because right now there's customers out there who desperately need our services, and we're facing opportunity cost if we swallow one of these customers, these liabilities, right? So one of the things that you're looking for is you're thinking about customers who write negative reviews, customers who ask for discounts, deals that broke down during the onboarding process. Okay. You're looking for customers who take you in the wrong direction, who give you the wrong feedback about your company. Okay. They're the ones where you want to draft a red flag, and you want to be really clear about eliminating them out of your organization as early as you possibly can before they get in. And later when we get to quadrant 4, I'll show you exactly how to do that. And of course, the issue is that you can disguise it in a P&L, right? You can say, oh, look at the deal we won. We won a fantastic deal this week. It gave revenue a bump, but underneath that, what it looks like an asset is actually a liability in the company. So we've discussed a little bit about the liabilities, the customers we never serve. We've got a profile around customers that we do serve. What about customers we ought to serve tomorrow? Now, what's really interesting here is one of the fastest ways that you can create revenue in your organization is simply to uncover a customer profile that the rest of you have missed. So an insurance company I work with in Singapore love this. What they do is they look at all the negative reviews, not only within their own organization, but they'll go out in the public domain. They'll look at all the negative reviews. They start to postulate and to think about new products that could be coming in quadrant 2, which I'll get to in a moment. And they start thinking about the customer they're going to serve tomorrow. If you want to make your organizations resilient, you've got to be thinking about who you're going to be serving in 6 months to 12 months' time, not just simply relying on a single pipeline of customers that you serve today. I think that if more companies had adopted that thought process prior to COVID, they probably would have been far more resilient during that period of time had they had that up their sleeves. Let's go on to quadrant 2 now. What we serve. When we run these friction tests, one of the things that we interrogate the entire organization, their online chat artists, their telephonists, the people who respond to email, everyone gets hammered, okay? And what we're looking for is all the irregularities in the information that they send back to us. And what we find is massive inconsistencies in what we serve. This is typical in service-based businesses like yours. If I ran a friction test on everybody in this room, I can dare say that we'll probably end up with a number of around 70 to 85% variance. And that's because, unlike the manufacturing industry, who got this right a long time ago, software and service-based companies don't spend enough time defining very, very clearly what we serve. So I'd like you to think about quadrant 2 on 3 levels. Features, limitations, and workarounds. It's not enough to have just features. Features don't cut it anymore. Features simply is, if you have a service and it's perhaps, let's just say it's conveyancing. You decide as the owner of the organization, what are the features of that service? You want to draw a perimeter around it, and you want to make sure it has a boundary. Otherwise, you'll suffer, which many of you understand, as scope creep. All right, that's where a customer decides to keep pushing and keep pushing and keep pushing because you didn't define the features at the beginning. But features are not enough anymore. We need to now nail limitations, and we need to understand workarounds. Okay, so let me explain why that's important. As I said to you, most organizations struggle just to get the features right. But if you can master the features, the limitations, and the workarounds, this is what happens when someone has an inbound telephone call. So if Jeff is taking an inbound call, or someone's writing an email to him with an inquiry, Jeff is now thinking, quadrant 1, I see the customer profile. Without even talking to the customer, I know I can anticipate who they are. I know what objections they're going to have. I know what limitations they will experience within the product, and I have the workarounds. And I can compress the entire conversation within 7 minutes on the telephone. That means your customers can make a buying decision in a few minutes. Do you know what the rest of the world does? We string them out. We don't tell them what the limitations are. We expect them to go looking at the terms and conditions of your contracts, right? We don't talk about the fact that the product is not designed to do this. Manufacturing companies, if I'm manufacturing a television set and I ship the television set, it comes with a manual. I open up on page 3, it says, do not operate in water. Why do you suppose on page 3 it says, do not operate in water? Wrote a bad review. Yeah. They're dealing with really bad PR. Okay. And so by just simply stating what the limitations of your products are, customers learn as much from the features as they do from the limitations. And then if you take it one step even further, even companies like Google with a $2 billion market cap have workarounds where you simply say, look, I want to be able to do this. And they say, look, it's got a limitation, it doesn't do that today. But if you do this and this, you can achieve what you want. Features, limitations, and workarounds compressed in one. If I was to give you one piece of advice out of quadrant 2, if you were to go back to your desks and be thinking about what could you do in quadrant 2 to make a difference, one of the things that we struggle with soliciting firms, professional service businesses, is to create trust with our customer. And so one of the things that you could do is go back and design a low-cost product that's designed to create trust in the most frictionless way possible. Let me give you an example. 2010, in my accounting firm, we created a product where we gave immigration advice over the telephone. You swiped a credit card over the telephone, we collected $500, and in 30 minutes, we delivered value about immigration. We tried to solve one specific problem that the customer was having. Immigration is really, really complicated sometimes in some jurisdictions. So we created this very simple product where someone could, at a very low cost, $500 over the telephone, swipe their card, and we could create a customer. They got to experience what we're like. They got to experience us at a low price point, and then they went on to buy more stuff in quadrant 2. Freemium is an excellent opportunity in quadrant 2. Freemium has been around for a long time. Software services do it, right? Software as a service companies offer a freemium product. And so if you decide that you want to build freemium into your products as a means of stepping up and then selling other things, that's a fantastic opportunity. But all I'm pointing out to you is that sometimes things can be so valuable that people may be prepared to pay even a small amount. And one thing I've noticed about clients is that if you can get them to pay you $200, you can get them to pay you $2,000. Okay, a byproduct of a quadrant 1-2 fit, when you fit these two together, the byproduct is revenue. And that's exactly what all of you have in the room. All of you have achieved this very minimum of matching who we serve tomorrow and do not serve, with features, limitations, and workarounds in quadrant 2. When you fit them together, the byproduct is revenue. And this is what most investors want to see. So you could continue doing just that, investing just in these 2 quadrants alone. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you into something a little bit deeper. We're going to start diving now into the irrational buying forces that are at play. And I'm going to take you into quadrants 3 and 4, particularly 4, where customer experience really matters. Yeah, quadrant 3 is operationally really difficult to pull off, but the advantage is massive. It's based on cultural identity. So if you sort of have a look on Wikipedia and research a bit more about cultural identity, it's this sense of belonging that customers have. I can think in recent years, only maybe 2 years ago, some of you may remember the launch of the Cybertruck, and Elon Musk during the product launch, the demonstration, they broke the window. You remember, right? It was quite funny. And this is on a live product demonstration. I mean, the product failed, right? Just broke. Yeah. And at the time when I was watching it on YouTube, it was a live stream, I started to see all the automotive journalists saying this is an example of an ill-baked product, another startup, this product's going to fail, no one's going to buy it. It's a bad product too. Okay, so if we look at quadrant 2, it's a bad product from quadrant 2. And as I was watching the news unfold, I started to sense to myself that I don't think it's going to go the way that they said it was. And what was interesting is the following day, 24 hours later, Tesla posted a press release that they had received 150,000 orders of the Cybertruck. You see, customers don't just buy from quadrant 2, they buy from the shared beliefs that they have with organizations in quadrant 3. And quadrant 3 taps into irrational buying forces where your customer will say something like this: OMG, I've been thinking about this for years, and finally, some organization, your organization, is doing just what I thought. You see, there's this sense of gratitude, of belonging, which gives you opportunity to charge greater prices in quadrant 2. A lot of organizations that I've seen think that if we add more features to quadrant 2, I can charge more for it. But how does the customer know that quadrant 2 is any better if they haven't tried it? How do they know that your documents and your contracts are better than another organization if they haven't tried it yet? A friend of mine, Terry, has a law practice in Singapore. And Terry came from what he described as a broken family. And when he went through law school, he said to me, it really, the divorce with his parents really affected him. And so when he went out and started his practice, he said, you know what, I want to begin a firm where when I handle family law, I want to practice it. I have a belief that I'm going to share with my customers, with my staff, and with my shareholders. And that is that I'm going to look at mediation, because I believe, this is what he believes, is that if I take an adversarial position between two parties, the children will be affected. And so you don't have to believe what Terry believes in, okay? It doesn't matter. But if there are people out there, customers, who go to Terry because they go, you know what? That's exactly what I think. I want to have a really good outcome for both of us so that the children are spared the bitter end of the consequences of a fight. And that's what Terry took. Terry wakes up every day. If Terry didn't make any revenue today, if he didn't score a quadrant 1, 2 fit, why does he come to work? Why does his staff come to work? Ask yourself this question, right? If you're trying to work out what is your belief that you have as an organization, ask yourself this question. If I took away the money that I'm making today, what would drive me to come to the office tomorrow to do what I do? Start with that, and then see if other people share the same belief. There's no currency in your mission, your belief, your vision, whatever you want to call it. The only thing that matters is if other people share it. That's the key part. of quadrant 3. And I think that if I come back to Jeff, thinking about what you said earlier about some of the customers that you don't serve, that you never serve, technically, you may be able to serve them in quadrant 2. You may have a quadrant 1-2 fit, but because they don't believe in the same things that you believe in, they become a poison pill. They are not a quadrant 1-3 fit, right? And this is where it comes undone with staff, right? Imagine the deception that you've created with staff. When you've hired them, you've shared that belief about what Terry was saying, about why we come to work to do what we do. We have a higher purpose than revenue. Revenue is good for shareholders, no good for staff, not particularly good for customers. And then all of a sudden, you're absorbing customers that don't share the same belief as the founder and the staff. With accounting, one of the things that we suffered from in that business was the product that we produced in quadrant 2, the customer couldn't care less about. You know, we would sit there painstakingly dividing different line items, clubbing certain things. Oh, that expense is actually a capitalization. Let's amortize that. And we try to educate them all on this. And they just look at us and going, what are you talking about? Listen, the reason why I use you guys is because you got it done in 2 weeks and I can sign it online. Wow. It had nothing to do with quadrant 2. With quadrant 3, what makes it so difficult for each of you to copy one another is to operationalize what Jeff is talking about is really difficult because it starts from the top. And coming back to what Ryan was saying earlier about how to operationalize it, how to do it, one of the things that I've seen CEOs do is rather than spending a lot of time in quadrant 2, every day when they have a WIP, like a little kind of get together around the water cooler, or you might do it online, is they'll jump into quadrant 3 and they talk about examples of customers that represent and share the same beliefs, of staff that did something that represent that belief. And I think the speaker earlier who was in the room said something really interesting, that culture is at the end, because it takes time to keep talking about it and acting upon it before people really believe in what you're talking about. The other thing that I've noticed is I've seen an accounting firm just recently through Remote Bears where it lost all of its staff. And one of the reasons why I think they went through a process of shedding is because the company that's buying them out don't share the same beliefs as the owners who are in the company right now. And so just through the process of going through the contractual merger, one party could sense the difference in the culture of the other party, and there was just en masse, people just left because they no longer feel like that this company believes in what they believe in. So these beliefs are really, really powerful. Okay, I'm going to take you now to my favorite quadrant, 4, which is really about the customer experience. What does it feel like to become a customer of your organization? That's really what quadrant 4 is dealing with. One of the interesting things about quadrant 4 is if we are serving, say, individuals, what we've found in our research is you could be serving between 5 to 11 different interactions to create a customer. If you're serving small business owners or maybe family offices, it can be between 10 to 20. And if you're dealing with enterprise customers, if anybody's in maybe the corporate M&A space in here, it's 50 interactions upwards. Now, what's interesting is that every experience that you have to create has a dollar cost. So when you decide in quadrant 1 to make decisions about who you're going to serve, there's a consequence here when you strike a quadrant 1-4 fit, because every time you change what goes on in quadrant 1, quite often you have a bounce back effect in quadrant 4 where the number of experiences is going to change. Maybe you have to retrain people to think differently. Maybe you need a different level of empathy, but there could be a change that happens and the cost to serve can go up. And a lot of organizations, when I've done this experience with them, when I've sat down and said, okay, they want to change the specification in quadrant 1, they want to start serving a different profile, When we start adding up the dollar cost of all the interactions in quadrant 4 and figure out the cost to serve, quite often they'll say, actually, don't want to serve that customer profile anymore. Now, one of the things I want you to be conscious of is a data point that we discovered called customer expiry. Earlier, we talked about Sally in the coffee shop, and after 15 minutes, she dropped off, right? Do you remember that? I hope so, because that means that my presentation is highly ineffective. She dropped off after 15 minutes. Okay. Dealing with consumers, I've built customer experiences where they can make buying decisions in 11 minutes. I've seen customer expiry happen in 14 days. Consciously or unconsciously, customers will appoint a certain amount of time to make a decision about what they want to buy. Okay, they're going to close out their buying decision within a certain time frame. And what I think all of you in the room ought to do is, as you're thinking about who you serve today, find out one more data point, which is, when will they expire? That means if you are too slow to deliver the experiences in quadrant 4, will you simply miss out because you're not fast enough? So the takeaway of quadrant 4 is, at a very minimal, be quick. If you can wow them, fantastic. We'll go into that in a moment. But by God, you need to be fast. I've seen buying decisions being made in 11 minutes. And that means all the interactions that you create in quadrant 4, some of them are not going to be delivered by human beings. So James, earlier, quite a few of those interactions that you were describing were, pretty high touch. But if you discern the figure, if you know what's going to happen, when they will expire, you have a huge advantage over another law firm. Let me explain a situation to just put context to this, right? There was a company that asked us to do a study on what happened to customers who didn't buy from us. And we looked at the 100 of them, went through telephone interviews. We discerned that they were genuine buyers. And when we went through the telephone marketing with them, we discovered that they didn't buy from anyone. Actually, they turned around to us and they said, every vendor that we reached out to sucked. And what we also discerned is that they were going to make a legitimate buying decision within 14 days. These companies had so much friction that the customer couldn't even buy the product. And after 14 days, they just didn't care. So you don't have to worry about one another and compete with one another because you're competing against customer expiry. That is a far more interesting data point to build a quadrant 4 against. Earlier, I was talking about irrational buying forces, and quadrant 4 is another example of irrational buying forces. If we come back and just think about Ryan's experience with me a few years ago with that application that he used during some cursive examinations, I said to myself, my goodness, if he does it this quickly and this well, imagine how good his law and solicitor work is going to be. You see, this is a cue to the value of this. My God, if they serve me this quickly, imagine how good the product will be. I don't know how good the product is because I haven't tried it, but in quadrant 4, I am building an expectation of how good it's going to be. It's a little bit like if you're really sloppy in serving them, if there's no consistency in quadrant 4, they think if quadrant 4 is as disorganized as this, imagine how bad their documentation will be. The beautiful thing about quadrant 4 is you can all go back as creative people, sit down with a blank canvas and say, right, here I go. I am going to take experiences that are not within the law firm, not within the law industry. I'm going to draft on my experience of unboxing an iPhone, signing up to Xero. I'm going to look at my experience of Tokyo Disneyland, and I'm going to take reference from there about what I want to bring into quadrant 4, and I'm going to wow my customer. And let me show you some of the things that we're doing at Remote Bears to achieve that. So for example, one of the things that we've done is most of the recruitment companies that we compete with, when we run friction tests, they just flog us CVs, right? They just send out CVs. What we did was we repackaged the CVs into a playbook where it has a story from beginning to end and includes information about how remote ready the individual is. Things that other companies aren't even thinking about. We completely repackaged the CV in a new way in quadrant 4. It's the same product in quadrant 2. We just changed the way we presented it. Let's take it into the law world for a moment, right? Professional service companies inundate clients with PDFs. They're dying and drowning in PDFs, right? Advice on email, disparate information in different places. If you took this one idea that I'm sharing with you right now, the playbook, what you could do is you can start putting all the information on your Zoom calls when you are talking through a concept. You can put it straight into their playbook. When you want to give them advice, you put it straight into their playbook. When you have links to specific assets outside of it that you want to draw attention to, you can put it inside their playbook. You make your business so sticky and so frictionless that they just want to keep coming back to you. Everybody else is drowning them in PDFs. They're dying, right? Dying of it. But you rethought it. You took an experience outside, brought it in, and went, I'm going to reimagine it. And you did nothing to quadrant 2. You didn't even have to go back to the solicitors and say, you need to go back to university and relearn lawyering. Just going to present it in a different way. One of the things that I've started to teach a lot of salespeople and consultants is, if we think about Jeff's experience, he's got all this email coming in and he's thinking about, okay, who do I want to serve? Once you get a perfect match between that person who comes in against who you serve, you want to get an advantage against your competitor. Your competition will be emailing them back to do a Zoom call, standard. Okay. But what if you have such clarity in quadrant 1 that you know exactly who they are, you know, you've anticipated in quadrant 2 exactly what they need to buy, features, limitations, and workarounds. And now you can shoot a 3-minute video and send it straight to them of you talking about your firm and how you're going to address their problem. While everybody else is running around with Zoom calls and are you available and can I get you on the phone, you're already delivering your brand and your message straight away. We don't believe in run frictionless in the funnel. I think a lot of you have probably seen that the sales funnel. So the funnel suggests that customers are herded like cattle to an apex. And it's not true, because where the world is going right now is in hyper-personalization. So coming back to Jeff, sorry, Jeff, I'm going to keep quoting you. Yeah, I know. Up here, what you're doing, Jeff, is you're figuring out which customer profile are those email inquiries right here in the early game. Okay, so if we were to break down that ridiculous funnel and think about it as an early, middle, and an end game, what it really ought to look like is a bloated fish. You need to have your customer journeys looking more like that. Over here, in the end game, they could buy exactly the same conveyancing product. But what happens is that they have parallel universes and they don't know that they're being served differently. Now, today, Jeff does it manually. With some of the supermarkets I've worked with, we're using AI to do this. So what happens is that these paths are being built by computers. But that's because the data is on such a high level. There's so much data sets that you and I can't do it. But in your law firm practices, what you can start doing is identifying who you serve here, who you don't serve, who's not going to be allowed to come in, and also continuing to evaluate them, even in the middle game, and thinking about ejecting them again if they don't meet the standard. What you can see happening here is you can identify in the early game variants. So a company I work with called Different, one of the ways we improved their onboarding was rather than saying, Different, by the way, they help you and I when we buy properties. They help them to manage those properties using a portfolio, like an online portfolio. And one of the things I criticized them about is that one of the reasons why their onboarding team kept failing is because nobody did this at the beginning, such that when we got down to the end to buy the product, the onboarding team had no granularity or context to who they were serving. All they had was a brief or a specification, which is not enough. So what happened was we had 3 different variants that we discerned right here, okay? One variant was customer who's just bought a piece of property, no tenant. Second variant, customer who's bought a property, has a tenant. Third variant, customer who has a tenant but has a terrible managing company and the property's losing money. You might say to yourselves, well, it's just real estate. Who cares? But the customer's goal in all 3 of these things are completely different. The customer who's losing money because the previous real estate agent is not managing their account properly has a very different agenda than the customer who's just got a new tenant. So when we build these tracks in here, we educate them differently. They get the same product, and then when the transaction occurs in the end game, when we move into the onboarding, we have a much smoother onboarding because we don't have to rediscover the customer twice. Where it breaks down is the handshake between the information that was gathered along the way here is not gathered. So we only gather, say, technical information about what the client needs as opposed to tagging them in the, let's just say we're using software, right? You don't have to use it, but let's just say for a moment if Jeff was using software, what he might do is he might identify them as ABC, he calls them something. Then as they're going through here, they have a slightly different experience, but when they get to the onboarding, they're identified as that customer profile. A little bit like the way a hospital would do a triage. Somebody comes in, the success of that patient depends on how well the station nurse triages that individual to either go into intensive care or you're going to go into maybe day surgery, right? So you could be getting patient treatment at the end, but if you don't make the right decisions and you do what the funnel suggests, which everyone just gets herded through the same process, there's no hyper-personalization there. There's nothing new that you're delivering. One of the things that you could try is, if we look at this example here, this is giving your organization a massive boost in the early game, right? You're getting a customer all the way down here. I've had salespeople call me back after I've already made a purchasing decision. They're like, oh, I sent you that proposal last week. Where are we at with it? I'm like, yeah, I've already purchased. I'm done. What are you talking about? Oh, well, I'm in the early game. I'm just trying to, who are you? Anthony. Oh, okay. You didn't read my proposal? No, I didn't read your proposal. The reason we've found is readership of words is decreasing and video is taking over as a consumption. And it's no lie because I can see the statistics of when customers open stuff, whether they're opening video or they're opening proposal. The trouble is that we've received such poorly written proposals over the last 30 years, bloated, massive documents that we've received and been expected to open and read, that most people will deprioritize opening that email when they know there's a proposal in there. One of the ways that we've broken down that issue is we send them a proposal walkthrough where during a screencast just like this, one of us will actually walk them through the document and within 2 minutes, they understand the value of that document. They can consume it from their phone and then they'll go and open your proposal and they'll read it. Coming back to your story, Leanne, it's very interesting because what we noticed is the same videos we're now using internally to brief the onboarding team. Mysteriously, they also don't read anymore. So they start opening up the walkthrough videos and they go, oh, so this is what we're doing. Okay, then they open the proposal and they get excited about that. Then they get the information and now they're ready. One of the white papers that we wrote, and Terry, the gentleman I was talking about earlier who has that practice in Singapore, he writes white papers about the devastating effects of divorce on kids. You know, he doesn't write any content from a law perspective. He's talking about something completely different. And so once you garnish the shared belief that you have in quadrant 3, white papers are really powerful now to drive that belief and that conviction into your customers that, yes, this is absolutely unequivocally the company that I want to work with. And so we started doing these. And in fact, we made them so friendly that there's a QR code which will link us back to them, even through WhatsApp, because we found a lot of our clients prefer using not email as a channel of conversation, but WhatsApp. So these are things that you can pick up on, even the very channel of communication, to get an advantage over your competition.